Hello, everybody. It is Jessa here again this week. I get 2 weeks in a row because our guest today is Randi Heathman, who is the Equestrian College advisor. And Kinsey and I chatted, and nobody had a harder time navigating the college experience than I did. So I can come to this conversation with genuine questions and mistakes and all of that context that, Randi would have been the perfect person for me to know back then. But I'm really, really excited to learn more from Randi. Randi helps students and parents navigate selecting a school, the application process, especially as all of it relates to how riding fits in, whether that's being part of, the school's equestrian program or club. But there's a lot to know and a lot to navigate, whether you're the parent or the student. And I know we have a lot of both in the Ride IQ audience. So Randi, please help us. And thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you for asking me to be here today.
So I told you a little bit, we were just chatting beforehand, and I already love you. Like, I'm having the best time chatting with you already. But I told you beforehand that I kind of got into articles about you and articles that you've written in preparation for this. And I love your story, and you're the perfect person to be in the role you're in. And I would love to retell the story, just because every step of the way I was like, it like takes a turn that kind of, landed you where you are in the kind of like, it felt like fate sometimes. And just like you're the right person in the exact right spot. But I will let you do that honor and tell us the story of how you got into the role you're in, and then kind of just describe a little bit more about the Equestrian College advisor and the work you're doing today. I know that's a big question. Take all the time that you need.
It is a big question. And I love that you describe it as like it feels like fate, because if I look back as events happened, or as I, made job choices or educational choices, I do look and I go, it feels like that just sort of happened. And yet it all came together in this really amazing way. So my background originally getting into this was I started after a very brief stint in credit union marketing, went and became an admission counselor for my alma mater, which is Albion College in Michigan. And I started at Albion first and foremost because I had been a campus tour guide, which there may be parents out there to go, I was a campus tour guide. I remember that. But I had connections in the office, and it happened to be that when I started as an admission counselor, it was the year that Albion opened their equestrian center. And I had this kind of personal tie to it, because when it came time as a senior at Albion to write my honors thesis, I only had horses on the brain. And I knew that the campus had 340 acres of farmland out the south end that they were not using. Well, it was in crop lease. And I said, has anyone considered building a barn, getting some horses, and letting some kids ride there? And it was funny, because our vice president for enrollment at the time, his mother-in-law had been the chairwoman of the Devon Horse Show forever and ever and ever. And so he kind of started that thought process. And so they said, do some research. And I said, perfect. I have to write an honors thesis. So I wrote an honors thesis that said, it was a little bit field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. If you have an equestrian program, you will attract students you are not currently attracting. Because as an equestrian who attended Albion, I was 16 miles from home and I could go home and ride my horse. So I hadn't had a problem as an undergrad. I just didn't get to compete as an intercollegiate student. And lo and behold, a series of circumstances happened that they took my honors thesis, and then in 2004 they had donations and they built an equestrian center. And so I became an admission counselor, and that meant I was recruiting not just equestrian students. I was recruiting football players and kids for the orchestra and biology majors, and I lived on the road out of a suitcase in the fall and in the spring, recruiting students, read the applications, helped them navigate financial aid. And I did that I rose kind of through the ranks and became a senior assistant director of admission in 2010. So I did that for a solid 6 years, which was a little bit longer than the tenure of a lot of admission counselors. And then I kind of transitioned into the role of specifically recruiting for equestrian. And then it was through that process that I discovered that there was this role, this job out there that was called independent educational consulting. And it was this kind of tell me more moment, and got in with a woman in the Detroit suburbs who was doing that. I used to do presentations for her group about what college admission officers were looking for when they read applications, and kind of looked at her business model and put a little bit two and two together, because when I was talking with equestrian students about Albion, a lot of students are saying, well, I want to come to this school, and because you all ride, and I want to keep riding, and I want to ride for you. And I would say, okay, great. What do you want to study? And they'd say, I want to do your architecture program. And I would go, great, but we're a liberal arts college. We don't have a designated architecture program. And so you need to put a little more thought, a little more research into your college search. Not that I wouldn't love to recruit every single student who wants to come here, but it also needs to be the right fit. Otherwise, students aren't happy, parents aren't happy. It's just not an ideal situation. So in 2012, I went through the Independent Educational Consultants Association, the IECA Summer Training Institute, which kind of was for new aspiring educational consultants. And this was back in the days they did it firsthand in person. They took us to Swarthmore College. We slept in the dorms. We ate in the dining hall. It was a return to a college experience, but they basically helped us all get our businesses off the ground. And so I've been doing this since 2012. I had a foray back to Albion, where I was the director of the equestrian program for a short period of time while they were transitioning some things. So I got to be in charge of the herd of 40 horses and all the staff in the barn and the budget and all of that piece, which was interesting. But, as an educational consultant, I really also consider myself to be a student of colleges, someone who studies higher education, gets to know the ethos of different colleges, what their academic offerings are they generous with financial aid or not, what type of student really thrives in this type of institution. And then on the side, I'm also a student of the college equestrian programs and developing relationships with coaches where I can. I'm learning about the different types of students that mesh well with these types of programs. And so a lot of times when I'm talking with parents and they're saying, we don't know any of this, I'm like, I know how much time I spend in my day and my week reading articles and networking with people and getting all this information. I don't know how a parent and a student are going to have time out of their busy lives to go and do this. And so that's where I am sitting here before you today.
It blows me away, even having read a lot of that before. I mean, for everyone listening, I hope you caught all of those steps. I mean, Randi wrote a thesis that was basically the impetus for the equestrian program at her college. And I love how you're like, that acreage wasn't being used. And you're like, well, it was, but not how it should be.
I mean, corn is great. Michigan
Right.
is an agriculture heavy state. So I don't want to not support agriculture, but I was like, I don't think we're thinking about this as true liberal arts people should.
You're a visionary.
Yeah.
And then you were on staff in the admissions office. You are a rider yourself. You ran the equestrian program for a period of time. You've gone through all of the training to guide students, and then have gone a level deeper to get specific on the equestrian side of things. So it's just kind of like the most beautiful compilation of experiences and background, so that you can guide parents and kids. And even as you were describing it, I was like, yeah, how does a person get their head around this, especially as a parent who maybe didn't go through an athletic program themselves, or as a student who doesn't have siblings or close friends who have navigated it, could give them any idea, which wouldn't be any comparison to the depth of an idea that you could help with people with. But it did bring up the anxiety that I had 15 years ago or 20 years ago, whatever it was at this point, when I was navigating it myself. And I think that the hardest part for me was knowing like where to start, and people would ask, like, what do you want in a school? And as a student, high school student, I was like, I have no idea what I want in a school. Like,
Yeah.
big school, small school, liberal arts, or, one with an architecture program. I didn't know the answers to those questions. And so I was kind of useless to myself. And, I applied to over 20 schools, which I'm
Oh my.
I'm sure my parents regretted like setting up my account because applications are expensive. So I did all of that effort, and ended up choosing the one that people thought was when people respond, they'd be like, wow, you got in there. And I was like, I guess this is where I should go. And then I transferred. I have 7 schools on my transcript, and
Oh my goodness.
finally graduated after I don't know how many years, but I have my degree in here somewhere. My dad framed it because we're all so amazed that I made it through. But it was a rough ride. And I think back then the understanding was kind of like, ask your school counselor for help figuring this out. And a school counselor has so many people to help, and limited training, not comparative to what you described. And Randy, I know you've been to like 125, maybe more campuses firsthand to experience them. So all that to say, I'm feeling similar to what I felt all those years ago, which is like, as a student, where do you start? And I'm sure a lot of parents and students come to you with that question first. So tell us how you would start that conversation and get someone on the right path. Like, what are the considerations they should be making? How do you put them at ease and reassure them that it's all going to be okay?
Yeah. We start with, you're normal. That's I think, because what you're describing is everyone, right? Who's just starting out on this. Parents, it's been a long time. If you've gone to college, it's completely changed. I remember going through my process, and I filled out paper applications by hand. I mean, we don't do that anymore. Now everything is online, and we have the common application and all of these things. So I think that overwhelms parents for one thing. And then, yes, the school counselor, their role has changed, and even a little bit since COVID, from the standpoint that a lot of them had to shift what they were doing to support other roles in the school while schools went virtual. And some of that hasn't shifted back. And then standardized testing kind of went away, but now it's coming back. And so they have large roles to play there, and they are very overwhelmed. And so parents have high expectations from them, want a lot from them, but aren't necessarily able to get it. And so when we're starting out, it's funny, I have on my website, if a family submits a form to ask for a consultation, I have a box that they can check, and it says, I am the non-horse parent of a horse crazy child, help. And I would say 85% of parents check that box. And I kind of stole that idea from a colleague who has a box on her form that says, I just need a hug. And I think that is the role that we educational consultants try to fulfill, is we try to be that virtual hug, saying, you are normal to be overwhelmed by this. So we're not going to start with, hey, let's get a list of 10 schools and have you look at them and say, does this work for you? Do you want to be a cardiologist? Do you want to be a gym teacher? What do you want to do? We stop and we say, who are you? What subjects do you enjoy? What subjects do you not enjoy? What excites you outside of the classroom? And for my riders, I know it's going to be riding. But every now and then I get a kid and I'm like, if you weren't riding for a week, didn't have homework for a week, like, where are you not spending any time, but you would love to? And I'll get little other things that they're like, I've wanted to try this, or I've thought about this, or I used to do this. And we just start pulling those little pieces together of, who are you as a 15, 16, 17-year-old student? We know you're going to change because you're not an adult yet. That's what you're going to go to college to do, is kind of the rest of the growing up, the rest of the education. So don't think you have to impress me on day one and say, I cured cancer in my basement. I rode on the Olympic team last year. And no. You're a normal kid. Maybe you got a B in US history last year. Okay. All of these things we can deal with. So I need to know who a student is, and I need to know from the family. Most families, college is incredibly expensive. So what's a budget? What do we consider to be important things to us as a family? As we've had these conversations, just putting those pieces together. And I do it through having conversations with kids. And then I've got different tools that I use that help us track them, that help them think about things. My juniors kind of know it, but kind of don't, that they're starting to write their college essays right now because they're getting short little writing assignments where I'm like, I need you to give me 3 sentences on this subject, just 3. Complete sentences, got to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. But, let's break this down into reasonable pieces. I would never tell a kid that just learned to jump last week to go jump a 3-foot course. We're not entering you in the medal finals next week. You just learned to jump. We're going to go over this cross rail until we're really confident about it. So I start them at that cross rail level of college search, college thought. And then by the end, we got them jumping that full course.
I feel more relaxed already. So piece by piece, start introducing them. We don't have to figure it all out today, but kind of take it and digestible little pieces. It sounds like a very smart way to make it less overwhelming. What is the ideal timeline on working with you, but also on starting to investigate? Like, I mean, would the ideal client have been looking into this before working with you? Describe the ideal timeline and what's going on when they meet you, how it all plays out.
It's funny because every year I will end up with like 1 or 2 like late seniors if I have space, which last year I did. I had space. I took 1 late senior, and she was the ideal late senior because she was on top of everything and she still met all the deadlines. So I will say not senior year is preferable. Backing up from that, I've gotten to a point, particularly in the last couple of years, where I really liked starting to work with sophomores. And the reason for that is that you don't start with college with sophomores and they're not thinking about specific schools necessarily. They might be thinking of a parent's alma mater that they visited or gone to games at since they were little. There might be a local college they thought of, or someone from the barn went to a particular school, but they're just starting to wrap their head around the academic pieces and what they're interested in. And to start there, when we have that time to have those conversations, is wonderful. Then when we get to junior year, we can kind of ramp it up, build the list and build the pieces in to get them ready for senior year. With that said, if a student is kind of on track, I will work with a portion of my students will be on track for NCAA Division I equestrian. And that gets a little bit, we want to be on a slightly quicker timeline where I want them maybe in as a 9th grader, so we can make sure that all of the pieces for NCAA eligibility get put together by the time they can start having conversations with coaches. I will work with any student who's gung-ho at 9th grade. That's totally fine. I've built in a package for that. I am starting to get inquiries from 8th grade families. That feels a little early. I like the 8th graders to transition to high school, just start getting good grades, start exploring things, do what your trainer and your parents tell you, and, call me end of 9th grade, beginning of 10th grade, and we can get started.
The wildly proactive clients.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. You mentioned like NCAA Division I. Can we start, is NCAA Division anything? Is that part of NCEA versus IHSA?
Correct. Should we break down the alphabet?
Yeah, I'm like, oh my God. Describe the different, I don't know what you even call those. Tell me what they're called, and then describe the different ones that colleges can assign to themselves.
Well, essentially, they function as 2 separate leagues. So the IHSA is the oldest and largest. It's the Intercollegiate Horse Show Association. And that's the one that Bob Cascione founded in 1967. And he's the one who created this wonderfully equitable format that the schools compete in. So no student, and I'm going to say this because a lot of your parents may not know this. So let's get this out here. No student who competes in an IHSA competition needs to bring a horse to school. So the host colleges and universities provide the horses, the tack, everything. The teams go to the host sites. A horse is drawn and the rider shows, and the riders are broken into divisions. So the IHSA breaks it down between an introductory division, which is a student who is essentially riding at the walk trot level. So that can be a beginner level student, maybe someone who's only ever gone on trail rides or ridden at camp, or family friends had horses and that was the only exposure. Now they get a chance to be on a team. So introductory level all the way through an open level, which for hunt seat riders is Metal McClay. You can have riders from that. For the Western side, it could be riders who have AQHA World Championships, maybe have NRHA earned money. And there's a level for everyone in between. And so it's almost 400 schools. I think it's something like 10,000 riders across the US. And there's a couple Canadian teams. People don't always know that. So then I'm going to say it was maybe 20 years ago. Please do not quote me on the timing, but the NCAA added as an emerging sport, women's equestrian. So to be clear, NCAA, which is grouped under the National Collegiate Equestrian Association, the NCEA. This is a female only sport. So IHSA is co-ed in the majority of cases. There's always so many times when I'm talking to people, I'm like, there's an asterisk on this. This is, in the majority of cases. So the majority of IHSA schools are co-ed. NCEA, which is NCAA equestrian, is single gender and it is female only. And right now we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 22 colleges that are members of the NCEA. It is Division 1 is the largest. Division 2 and Division 3 are smaller. There is an option, typically this is for the smaller schools, to be single discipline, and nearly all of the single discipline schools are single discipline for the hunt seat. In Division 1, they are primarily dual discipline, so they have the hunt seat and the Western. And in order to be successful as an NCAA D1 equestrian, students come in with very impressive show records. So the riders have to be showing at least 3.6 in the equitation, or higher. In the Western and the reining, we're talking AQHA World Championships in horsemanship, NRHA money in reining. It's kind of the elite level, and they compete in kind of a head-to-head format. So that's one school at a time. Whereas IHSA is, I call it track meet style. So you'll have a group of schools come in and then they compete. You'll have a mix of riders from the different schools. And there's a whole offense defense thing that comes in if you really want to dive into coaching, but we probably don't. But anyway, those are the largest, and kind of the bulk of my practice ends up dealing with students who are primarily IHSA, because again, with that being the largest organization, the majority of students are going to end up doing something in that area. I end up with a handful every year who are NCAA D1 prospects. And then the other portion of my business is a mix of, I love it. Every year I always have a couple of eventers. I'll have every now and then students who just want to take a horse with them to college. So they want to find a location. It's very important to them. I had a polo player one year, which was amazing. And then I have a very small percentage of the younger siblings of former clients who do not ride, but the families come back to me and say, she plays soccer. Is that okay? And I go, it's great. Just bring her on.
That's amazing. So as far as disciplines go, these programs really cater to hunt seat riders and Western riders. And if you're a different discipline rider prior to college, you probably fit yourself, you transition for college.
There are a handful of schools doing the Intercollegiate Dressage Association, so dressage
Okay.
riders. There is an intercollegiate association for saddle seat, mostly concentrated in Kentucky and Tennessee, which probably doesn't surprise a lot of listeners.
And these are not under IHSA. These are just
Correct.
separate.
These are under their own umbrellas. And US Eventing has a collegiate program that is designated and it runs through the US Eventing Association.
Got it.
And so, yeah, so that kind of also gives students another competitive outlet. But no, that is not NCAA. It's not IHSA. It is its own. I think the technical name for that is it's the Collegiate Eventing Program.
Okay.
I don't know. Your eventing riders can go to USEA and it's all the information's on the site.
We've said so many letters.
I know. It's alphabet soup.
Yeah. But I'm tracking. So it seems like even as you described this, it's helpful to hear about the differences and start kind of understanding what that decision tree would look like, whether it's, for whatever reason, the level of rider you're at, the discipline that you do, the variety of schools you want to be able to choose from. When it comes to NCAA, are those schools, are the athletic programs for equestrian sports running similar to athletic programs for other NCAA D1 sports? Like, are these coaches out there early recruiting riders to the team? Do they have scholarship money? Does that run similarly to, for anyone familiar with NCAA other sports? Is it really very similar?
Yes. So it's truly an NCAA sport. So that's everything from regulating when contacts with coaches can be made, when there are dead periods, when there are when juniors are first allowed to be in contact with coaches, social media regulations, all of that in place, right up to official athletic visits, unofficial visits, drug testing policies, study hours for enrolled students. All of that framework comes into place for them. So they are true NCAA athletes. For scholarship dollars, equestrian is what they call an equivalency sport. So just as an example for the college football fans out there, that's a head count sport. The difference is in head count sport, the sport gets so many full scholarships, and a full scholarship, let's say they have 22. So on a football team, you have 22 students who are all on full scholarship. And so you kind of distribute those in order to build your team. With an equivalency scholarship, which doesn't just apply to equestrian, it can be a sport like volleyball, other sports. They have, usually it's the equivalent of 15 full scholarships, but then they're going to distribute that amount of money across the roster how they would like to. So if you have a 60-person roster and you have the equivalent of 15 full scholarships, you can say, you're going to get textbooks this semester. You're going to get textbooks plus housing. I mean, there's a variety of different ways they can break it down. And what I tell families, the number one thing, especially because we know how expensive college is and we know how expensive our sport is. So we have these two very expensive prospects coming up for us. The majority of scholarship dollars that are available to students, particularly our sport is majority female, particularly female students, is going to be academic merit scholarship. So do not buy the farm, 6 horses, the amount of money that you can spend to get your textbook scholarship to ride on an NCAA Division I team. You could spend $1 million to get that. Then you get textbooks. If you have the $1 million, save it for the tuition, right? And the room and board and the fees and things. And if a student has good grades, and I say good grades because merit scholarships can be for B students, can be for B+ students, A- students. You don't have to have a perfect GPA, but there's a lot of academic scholarship money that is awarded to students when they are accepted to a college, and that's renewable for the 4 years that they're there, as long as normally they have to maintain a certain GPA. It could be anywhere from a 2.5 to a 2.9 to a 3.0. I tell them, if you go to class and you do your homework in college, it is very hard for them to take away your academic merit money. I know it has happened, but whereas the athletic money is year to year also. So if you take a family ski holiday and break your ankle and you have pins and you may not be able to ride in the fall, you might lose your athletic scholarship because they're going to give it to someone who isn't dealing with PT and pins in an ankle or something. I mean, life is uncertain, so I like to go for the things that are the most certain
Yeah.
when I'm advising families. So there is that disparity between athletic scholarships, and I think there's a prestige to that in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, but if they're offering you $30,000 a year in academic money, slap a bumper sticker on your car. My kid's smart, 30,000 a year.
Yeah.
Versus 2,000, 5,000 a year that you know is great and is saying that they're successful in their sport. And we don't want to take anything away from kids because I know that they work hard. I have great admiration for my students and what they do and their abilities. But let's also, crunch some real numbers here.
Yeah. So both athletic and academic scholarships fall under the umbrella of the equivalency scholarships. Like the coach would deem it specific, or are those totally different?
Nope, they'll come from separate
Okay.
areas. So the equivalency scholarships live in the athletic department.
Okay.
The academic merit scholarships come through admissions.
Got it. Okay. That makes
So,
complete sense.
yep.
So it sounds like NCAA is incredibly structured. They have a set number of students that can be recruited or make it onto the team, and that is a process that starts pretty early. And I'm curious how it compares to IHSA schools. I know that there's a huge spectrum of skill sets that can get involved in equestrian programs at IHSA, but is the coach of maybe the upper level programs like similarly involved? Do they have a set number of seats? Is it competitive? If you're going to an IHSA school, do you have a guaranteed spot on the team and at a specific level like you would at NCAA? Or is it more like we'll figure it out once you get there and tryouts happen after you've already committed to that school?
So it's my favorite answer to give to parents. It depends.
Okay. Asterisks.
Yes, asterisks. Here we go. But the IHSA, there are two terms that I think confuse people in the IHSA. So I want to dive into those before we get to the recruiting because I think it's really important. There are many IHSA teams, both Western and Hunt Seat, that are deemed varsity. And so people hear varsity, they automatically equate that to the NCEA. And so they say, oh, well, I didn't see them on the NCEA list. No. Varsity means that the athletic department at a particular college has declared that this sport is varsity and that the athletic department will be supporting this sport. So that typically means that the coach is an employee of the athletic department and that the students who are members of that team have varsity athlete regulations, whatever that school determines for their athletes. And this can be schools that are part of the NCAA. They can be part of the NAIA, which is another athletic organization that oversees some colleges and universities. So there's, like I said, varsity is basically a school saying our athletic department supports this sport and these athletes. So you have varsity IHSA teams, and then you have club teams. And club teams are typically student run, student driven, and they report every campus in the nation has some kind of student activities, student government association where they have, a knitting club and a Harry Potter club and a surfing club or whatever is, in that institution has 60, 70, 80, 100 plus clubs and organizations that are all under that umbrella. And so the equestrian club would therefore fit under that umbrella. And a lot of equestrian clubs are able to get funding from these organizations as well to help offset some of their costs. And so those are the two structures for IHSA clubs and teams in the United States.
Got it.
So with that in mind, the clubs typically don't recruit because the coach is usually a trainer in the area who owns the horses, has a facility, and the students hire this person and say, what's your lesson rate if we come for X number of lessons? Will you support us at shows? What's that going to cost? The team comes up with the budget, whether they fundraise, whether it comes from the institution. Typically, they'll pay a team fee, maybe their membership, maybe their dues. So some teams pay everything and some teams pay almost nothing every year. It really depends on the school and the way that it's set up. But when I have students who are looking at club schools, I'll put them in contact with club president, team captain, whoever is designated by those students to be kind of their outreach person. You can still visit the barn and meet with the trainer. Typically, when you visit the school, you can meet with students. There are some clubs out there that are in some ways more competitive or even better organized than some varsity programs. I mean, students do a really good job. And I tell students those are resume quality skills.
Totally.
So, right? You need
and
them.
life skills. We need
Life
this stuff.
skills.
Yeah.
We had students come out of our club team and they would go to a job interview or go to a grad school interview, and they don't care about your GPA because they've seen your transcript. They've seen, okay, yeah, you're a 3.7 student. Great. Tell me about a time. I see you were secretary of the equestrian team. Tell me about a time everything went wrong and what you did and how you worked with your teammates and how you fixed it, because that's that interesting thing.
Totally.
So don't discount those clubs. But then the varsity coaches, just like any sport, typically will go recruit. They will be in contact with students. They want to see video. They want to see show records. And they may offer a roster spot before a student gets there, or they may still require that they try out after they've selected the school. It is very common in the IHSA that regardless of if the school is club or varsity, that the students have to try out to get a space on the team. And so again, this is where it comes down to making sure that that school list is really good and that you really like the school, because if you don't make the team first semester, it doesn't mean you can't try out again, but you need everything else to be working for you so that you still have a great first year or first semester before you're able to ride on the team.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Are these teams filling, I'm guessing it's a specific number of spots overall?
Average size for an IHSA team is 25 or 26.
Okay.
That's
yeah. So it just kind of depends how competitive, how many girls go out or how many people, girls in NCAA, how many people go out for it. Okay. Got it. Now I'm curious about kind of determining what different options will bring in terms of the equestrian experience. And I know that the academic experience and the school at large is such an important consideration. So not to say that this is, the end all be all consideration, but when you're talking to students or parents about what to expect from an equestrian program, what are some of the questions that you would have them ask themselves for you to get a grasp of what they're looking for, but also for them to start getting their head around how these equestrian experiences differ? I'm thinking of things like, I don't know how the competition schedule compares. I don't know how the cost compares to different options. I know bringing your horse or not bringing your horse factors in, but what are some like that list of questions that you would start putting out there so that people can get their heads around what this might look like?
Yeah. The number one question that I start with is kind of what type of competitor are you? Because I will have students come to me and they are all in, super competitive. I want to win and I want to be an active part of that. And if I have to, quote unquote, sit the bench, I don't want to be part of that. I want to be somewhere where I can feel like I make a difference. Now, and some of them will say, I get it if I'm a freshman and I sit the bench for a year, but I don't want to sit the bench for 4 years. I want to play an active role. And so for a student who has that level of competition, that's not a student that is necessarily going to be happy at a school where the club team, their attitude is, we go to shows and we have fun and it's a great outing. And if we place, that's great. And then we do our, social events on campus during the week, and we're not super competitive. That's a mismatch. So what type of competitor are you? What is the most valuable part of the experience? Or are you a team builder where you go, if I can be in the background and helping people, and I just want to be in the barn doing things and cheering on my team from the background, then there's a lot of options where that could be a great fit. And a coach could say, ooh, I want that kid because this is a role. I need this cheerleader role, this helper role fulfilled. Major can play a role, because if a student wants a super competitive but very classroom and lab intensive major, so I'm thinking of students who want to maybe look at nursing, potentially pre-med or pre-vet, that's a very similar curriculum. Students looking at engineering, those are very, very intensive majors that require a lot of in-class but also out-of-class time. And so you may want a less stressful equestrian experience overall, regardless of how competitive you are, because you're going to be in the thick of it. Typically sophomore year of college, if you are thinking of pre-medical or pre-veterinary, you're going to be taking organic chemistry for a year. And that is kind of the make it or break it class for whether or not students are going to proceed in that area and be able to get into medical or veterinary school. So you really need to kind of focus on that. And I was talking with a parent last night doing a consultation, and this parent was saying, you're really focused on the academics. And I say, yes, because I've never in 12 years had a parent say to me, okay, one time in 12 years, it was a very specific situation, but the rest of the parents have never said to me, regardless of what she majors in or regardless of what he majors in, we're going to continue to support this riding sport until, our child is 57 years old. No, they're all saying, we have made a commitment to the riding. We're making a commitment to higher education. And after that, our student needs to figure out how to support this sport and support themselves afterwards. And so I'm going, okay, well then how do we get this job? How do we make this happen? Because I'm an adult amateur, and I do ask my parents regularly if they will contribute to my sport, and it's really weird. They won't.
Still taking donations.
Right? Yeah, please. Accepting, you can Venmo. It's great. But so I understand the strain and the budgeting and the time management that goes with being an adult amateur. A lot of my students may want to become professionals. And so that's another route that we have to examine. What does being a professional look like to you? And what area of the profession do you want to go into? I mean, there's all of these questions that you have to drill down to. But I really think it comes down to what kind of competitor are you? And then where do you see yourself heading? Understanding that the majority of 17-year-olds are undecided. That is okay. And I say this with love to all of my students. Every time I meet a new client and they tell me that they're interested in studying business, I know what they're saying is, I'm really undecided, but business just sounds better.
I have no idea. But business sounds like it might support my riding habit. Yeah.
Yes. So
spoken from a business major.
See, exactly.
Is it accurate to say that these programs run from like being kind of like a sorority with riders, made up of riders, all the way to, serious college athletes, which sounds like it could fall within either IHSA or NCAA, but like that's taking everything, very seriously and training probably very frequently with the social component very much being just kind of like a side effect.
Yeah, absolutely. It's every campus has their own culture and feel and vibe, and every club or team or varsity program, same deal. And I think the only difference between the clubs and how they, their culture and how they operate and how they function within their student body, that is very student driven, and it can change from year to year as you have different student officers, and you probably get changeover every 4 years as students graduate. The difference, obviously, on a varsity side, regardless of division, regardless of whether it's IHSA or NCEA, is the culture typically comes from the coach because they are the consistent leader. And so, that's another piece where you want to absolutely understand what a coach's program is as part of the search experience, as part of the recruiting experience. But coaches are employees. And so I always also remind people, coaches may change jobs. A coach could recruit you and then change jobs over the summer. Yeah. Again, this is why the school has to be important. They might be retiring. They, a million different things could happen. And so you absolutely want to understand what the culture is. A lot of times culture will remain consistent. The assistant coach may step into the leadership role and everything stays pretty much the same with some different tweaks. But be mindful of that too, because I think that's a little opposite the world that we come from as riders coming out of the junior ranks, where you may have ridden at the same barn with the same trainer since you were in short stirrup or where you started. And so your trainer has just been this consistent person, and trainers, bless them, they're great people. They get in this industry and they just stay and they keep teaching, and we can stay with them or we can shop around and find a new trainer. Whereas the coach, it is a true, athletic role within a division of the college.
Yes, it's a position they're holding. I'm curious, when you're visiting college campuses to get your head around the college and the equestrian program, what are kind of, I keep saying ideal, but what are the ideal things that you would see firsthand from the equestrian program that help you understand so that you can relay all of this stuff, the culture, what the team vibe is like? I'm sure you're talking to the coach, but are you like touring barns, seeing lessons? Yeah. And how does it what is helping you the most in terms of like differentiating these programs?
Yeah. If I can see a lesson, it's always great, and if I can, sometimes I'll go on a campus tour and they might not. I have a colleague that she was on a campus bus tour with a group of other educational consultants, and they weren't going to stop at the barn on one campus. And she went, I'm going. And she snuck out of lunch and she ran to the barn and she goes, it was the most fabulous experience. And, here's the student that I talked to, if you want to talk to this student later. So I like talking to the students is huge, because I want to talk to them about what their college journey was and what they have experienced. And once they understand what I do, they want me to know everything, because they want more people to, especially when they're having a great experience. They're like, everyone should come here, and here's why. And then they will also be very honest. They'll say, this is a mistake that I made, or this is what I wish was different. And what I remind students, and I probably beat this metaphor to death with them, but I'm like, this is a little bit like horse shopping. So we are looking for a unicorn, and we really pray that we come back with one, but we have a checklist. And chances are, whatever we have on the checklist, we're going to come back with, if we do a really good job, 75 to 80% of what's on that checklist, we're going to check off. But there's going to be things that aren't going to be perfect. And you'll kind of say, well, I wanted a bay gelding, but it's a gray mare. And you know what? She checks off everything else. So I'll just go buy some more purple shampoo and we'll call it a day, right? I'm willing to make that sacrifice because everything else is working. And so if everything works on a campus, but it's not, it's in a northern location and you didn't want snow for 4 years, and you're like, well, okay, everything else is great, so bring on the snow. It's a little bit of that. So when I'm looking around, I want to see the students interact with each other. I kind of want to be a fly on the wall and see, how do they treat each other? How do they, do they know what's going on when they get to the barn? Do they have a routine? I always look at the horses. We all do that. Every program has different types of horses in different regions. You'll see different breeds. Everyone has a different style of horse keeping. So just getting a sense of the overall picture, because anytime I'm looking at a college campus, I'm trying not to look through the lens of, would I go here? Because I've been to college twice and I'm not going back.
Yeah.
But who should go here? because I'll think of, maybe my specific clients at the time and I'll go, oh, this is not a good one for her, but ooh,
Yeah.
he would really like that, and I'll make notes and I might be on a webinar with a college doing a presentation, and I'll make notes and I will go back to student files and I'll put these schools in their files right after the webinar and go, oh, we got to talk about this school because
Yeah.
of this program, or I'm going on a bus tour of college campuses in 10 days and I can't wait because I'm going to make notes, while I'm on tour. Oh, this student, we need to put it on this list. And going to a couple campuses that have equestrian programs that I haven't been to before. I know of the programs, but I'll get to kind of do that observation. And yeah, just trying to get a sense of who would be comfortable here and who can I envision in this environment.
Totally. I mean, it's like the horse shopping comparison you made. Like the perfect horse for you is so different than the perfect horse for me, but that's your unicorn and my unicorn. And like,
Yep.
I think especially as, and you know better than I do, but I'm thinking of my own experience as a 17 or 18-year-old, it's so tempting to look around and be like, what is the right answer versus looking inside and being like, what agrees with me and what will make me the happiest for the next 4 years.
Yeah. I warn my students usually during the consultation before they've hired me. So I warn them in front of their parents. You will ask me lots of questions.
Mm-hmm.
I will answer your questions with lots of questions because, yeah, a lot of times students are coming out of high school and they know that there's a right answer. And they're like, I got to get to the right answer. And they're trying to give me a quote unquote right answer. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no. The right answer is what you believe, what you come up with, what is right for you. So I'm going to ask questions to help you get to that.
That's why I like
will
that
not
you're
answer
on a bit of a longer timeline too. So it's not like it gives them some time to let these questions marinate and maybe embrace them, versus trying to find the right answer that is not, them. The right answer that is them is different than whatever they think exists as like, this overarching right answer.
And I can remind them it can change because there's so much that they just don't get exposed to in high school. That's the way high school is set up. You take certain subjects and I love it. I have a client right now who is wrapping up sophomore year, and we're just general conversations and everything. And then we hit on the idea that there are a lot of jobs in the sports industries, like sports business, sports management, sports marketing. And I watched this student just light up like, wait, this is a job? And I'm like, yeah, no, they don't teach you this in school because you're taking English and history and science and math. But yes, we can start to explore what jobs are in that industry, what skills you need for those jobs. And once these light bulbs start clicking, then you almost can't stop them. And then it's like, well,
Yeah.
you've seen this and this. And it's like, okay, now we're going to organize, but at least we know what direction we're headed.
Right. So you mentioned that it's so helpful for you to talk to, especially students who are in the program. How much interaction with students or coaches can parents and college perspectives expect, and what will set them up for success in that arena?
I say this to the parents with love. Back away a little bit, especially when having those conversations with coaches, because you absolutely have valid questions. You are the one writing the check for college, so you are investing. And so this is very important to you. With that in mind, you have to put the student in the driver's seat. There's this wonderful metaphor that we were discussing, one of our educational consulting groups, where when you start the process of searching for college, you envision it like a car, and the parent is in the driver's seat and the student is in the passenger seat. And you start to hand the map back. When we used to drive with a map, let's pretend that there's no navigation in the car. The student is reading a map to you and telling you which turns. And you want to get to the point where you get the student in the driver's seat and now you're in the passenger seat and you have the map and you're kind of giving some guidelines like, oh, we got to look up, there's a turn ahead. But the student is really saying, okay, but this is where I want to drive to. This is what I want to do. This is what I need to know. So they're taking that. And then by the time you drop them off at college, they actually have a friend in the front seat and you're in the back seat. And then like eventually you just step out of the car altogether and you wave as they drive away, because you've built those skills in, and they are independent. And so when students are having these contacts, parents help them come up with questions like, oh, don't you want to know about this? But then they need to send the questions in the email. If they're having that type of back and forth with the coach, they need to ask the questions in person with the coach. The coaches want to know, who am I dealing with? What is this student like? Are they going to fit in with my current roster? And they are looking at the parents a little bit like, okay, is this parent going to try and call me every week on the phone, or are they,
Totally.
right? Like, so there is a big part of that. So I would tell parents, let your student take the lead and start to develop an idea of when is a good time for you to ask your questions. I tell my parents, I always meet one-on-one with students. Unless we're doing, like, we might be doing campus visit planning where I need the parent there because they're helping with organizing flights or driving or whatever. But pretty much I'm meeting one-on-one with students. I will always send the parent a follow-up. Here's their homework. Here's what we're talking about. Here's maybe a question that I had. What questions do you have? And I tell parents, you can schedule a call with me anytime. I will always chat with you. You are paying the bill here as well. But the reason that you hired me was for my expertise, and so that I can, kind of preserve that parent-child relationship too, because I can say, your student is working on an essay right now. I have given them this deadline and I'm staying on top of them to make sure that they get this done. And then you as the parent don't have to be nagging going, have you got your essay done? Have you even started it yet? Well, what are you going to write about? It takes that stress away from those conversations, so you can have better conversations in your home without worrying about this really stressful looming deadline.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. I married into a lacrosse family, and all of the siblings are now coaches, including my husband. And it's amazing how parents can really derail a kid's trajectory because they're such a pain in the ass to have on the team. And that's in quotes, because like they're not on the team, but they like are really, unintentionally creating challenges that don't agree with, what the goals of the team are and where people can be spending time. So I really like that description that you give people to help the student run the process.
Yep, for sure.
So we somehow only have 3 minutes left, which I've been watching the clock and I'm like, how is this possible? There's so much that I could learn from you, but I will say my head is around this 100 times more than it was initially. And I really do feel, not that I'm going through the process, but I'm putting myself in the shoes of people who are, and I feel so much more at ease. Like, this is something that, can be tackled in a way that makes sense and does lead to something that is more right than what other choices would be. But it still does feel like having a guide through the process is so helpful. And I know that there's just a million expenses that come up with college, and this is another added expense. And this is not a promotion. Randy didn't ask me to do this at all, but I'm kind of like, given what a big choice it is, having someone to help you through it and understand, what you're getting into really makes so much sense.
Well, and there's you don't have to work just with me. There are many people who do what I do, and they live in the United States, Canada, all around the world. There's about 4,000 educational consultants. Everyone has different price points. So, there are less expensive consultants. There are very expensive consultants. I think of myself in the middle, but I don't know. There are a lot of options that people have. And so I think the important thing is to assess as a family, like, what is our big need? Where are our pain points in this process, or where are they going to be? And then how can we address them? And, what makes sense? I added one option for families who are like, we're on a strict budget. We don't know that we can do a full package, but we just need some advice. It's Ask Me Anything. You go on, it's a paid session. It's 90 minutes. You give me some info coming in the door. I need to know grades and some background and things. But in that 90 minutes, if you just want me to drill down into everything that's specific to you and answer all your questions, I'm happy to do that. And if I can send you off, and it helps get you on the road, then, I would hope that it's money well spent,
That's what I'm doing right now. Ask me anything with Randi.
Right.
Okay, to end, I'm going to ask you an unfair question, but just
Uh-oh.
I like ending with something a little bit, fun and light. And I'm curious if you had to choose a college to go to today as yourself today, not as yourself at 17 or
As
18.
grown up me, yes.
And obviously including the equestrian program. I know that was like crucial to you back then, and I'm sure it's so crucial to you. But without any restrictions of like where you're located, family, anything like that. Where would you choose for the next 4 years?
Oh my gosh. It's so I always tell people my favorite college is the most recent one that I visited. So
Yeah,
it's a little bit of a cheat. Like, it's like, oh yeah, no,
totally.
that's my favorite. I have such love and adoration, and I can't explain why. I think it was just an ethos, but one of my favorite colleges in the United States. It is overlooked. It should not be, but I love the College of Worcester in Worcester, Ohio. And they have an equestrian club. They don't have a varsity team or anything. They do, fun fact for people, if you play the bagpipe, they have a bagpipe scholarship. And maybe that's so cute that that's why I love them. But I've always loved that school. And I think adult me would probably give that one a hard look and see if that would fit I don't know what I would major in now, but
Bagpiping,
I find
maybe
something. I find something.
a new hobby. That is really cool, and it makes me so happy to hear that answer because you can tell like it's true to you and it just felt right to you. And I know that you are not big on like overweighting the name of the college. Like there are so many kind of underrated colleges, which I would say that one that you just mentioned probably is underrated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
There are people right now that are like searching, like College of Worcester.
it's the
What?
first thing I'm going to look at, right? I get up.
It's so pretty.
Um,
Yeah.
well, Randi, this has been such a treat. Thank you for letting me pepper you with questions and, my uneducated questions. I appreciate it so much. Where can people find you on social or elsewhere if they want to follow you or reach out?
I'll make it super easy. Website, equestriancollegeadvisor.com. I do tell people advisor is, VOR. So equestriancollegeadvisor.com. I am on Instagram at College Advisor. I had to shorten it a little bit. And then Facebook too, search me the same way, facebook.com/equestrian college advisor. So yeah, they definitely can look me up there and learn more. I do a Monday video post that's little video tips for the college search. So if
Cool.
you're following me on Instagram, then you can get those tips on Mondays.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much, Randi. I am going to go look up the College of Worcester and follow you right now. So it was
Awesome.
such a pleasure to meet you. Thank you truly for just sharing your expertise and helping us navigate this very just a lot going on, a time that is a lot going on, an important time. Thank you
Right.
for helping us kind of figure it out.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.